Today we're going to discuss one of the lesser known aspects of history than the others. As historians, we tend to inflate certain events such as the World Wars, the Cold War, the fall of Rome, and etc. As historians, we like to ignore the fact that cultures build and grow over time, and it is often very difficult to find a common lineage to trace a point in time where a culture was defined or a culture had truly seeped its way through and influenced other cultures. We have discussed the great cultures, as there is clearly a difference in worth between certain cultures, ones which place more emphasis on the individual, liberty, community, faith, and religion. Although all people are equal, not all cultures are created the same. And although one can exist in a subpar culture with greatness, it takes a great culture to build a great society which can withstand the test of time. Irish culture is not included in the pantheon of the great cultures of time, and unlike those cultures, it has been irresistible to colonialism, expansion, or hatred. Of course, these aspects alone do not diminish a nation's worth or the worth of its culture, and of course a culture can only get you so far, and a country's people are truly what define it. None of this is to say that we can truly judge things in such a black and white manner. However, I would like to acknowledge that I believe that countries do go through golden ages, and that countries have brilliance, and that they have a resurgence of ideas and culture, which can lead to the spark which ignites more in people, which builds cultures into themselves, builds churches, builds academic institutions, and builds more. And I think that during the period after the fall of Rome, whenever Christianity came to Ireland, and whenever we helped rebuild the fallen Europe after the collapse of Rome, which had been in the making for hundreds of years, that was our high point. This is the Second Irish Golden Age. To put into context where Europe was at this time in history, it was not good. The once unifying force of the Roman Empire, which has built aqueducts, infrastructure, institutions, had converted Europe to Christianity and more, had been a shamble of its former self. Corruption ran deep in the Roman state, with a list of terrible emperors, terrible politicians, terrible decay and collapse, and the fall of Rome was really whenever all of these factors came to a head. The culture had become as savage as the barbarians who had crashed through the once wonderful city. And although Europe would not recover through the Dark Ages, the Irish made the blow a little bit better. Often Byzantium is credited for this, with the restoration of Rome. However, I would say that Byzantium held on to a lot of the corruption that Rome had fostered, a lot of the corruption which still exists in Europe to this day. It had split the religious aspect of the empire into two distinct entities, which did nothing but collapse the once great religious institutions of Rome. The Irish had, in their transformation to Catholicism, which was due to a numerous amount of factors, and a lot of other cultures had a lot to do with that, had a less hierarchical view of Catholicism, and a view which the Catholic Church, I believe, took on and still exhibits many traits of to this day. A lot of the great revitalization of Catholicism was one of the best parts of the Dark Ages in Europe, and I would attribute a lot of this to the breadth of the Irish experience to build academic and religious institutions in mainland Europe and on the Britannic island. This isn't to say that we were superior or dominated over other peoples, but merely that we gave back what they had given us by travelling to our island and converting us to Catholicism. Culture is a shared experience as we exchange the good and the bad with each other, but it was never a principle of Irish culture of conquest. We never felt the need to conquer over others, but merely to share with them. The wisdom of our elders brought us to this point, and we shall bring it to you. This idea is integral to Catholicism, that we're a community, that we go to church and mass on Sundays, that we work together, and that we foster a love for each other, for our fellow man. Whether purposeful or not, we always seem to take ordinary things and transform them a little bit into our own, as many cultures have done. Even things such as trading gold, we seem to take a little bit of pride in it, a little bit of perfectionism in making it as good as it could be. Evidence suggests that we were a very wealthy people, that we enjoyed such wealth, and for such a brutal and tragic history, it's fascinating to imagine that we are once a much more peaceful group of people and that we shared more in common. Before we entered the colonial period, we seemed to pay a special patronage to the arts and literature. Of course, all this in motion, and there were negative aspects to our culture even going back to thousands of years ago. But if you would pay attention to Irish history, I think you would understand that most of what I'm discussing is not in relevance to the Second Irish Golden Age, but more so the Late Bronze Age, in which we really were at the height of our purity in that sort of culture. And some of this, well, why was Ireland and Scotland so much more adept than the Celtic peoples? With all due respect to them, why did we seem to have a Gaelic transformation? And many will point to the Egyptian influence that seems to play a role and seems to come up time and time again. And of course, many will denounce the theory. I seem to believe it, as we're often considered honorary Mediterranean as a people in Hibernia. However, there is a lot of savagery, there is a lot of, as there was in the ancient world, there was a lot of paganism, and there are a lot of things that Christianity would hatch out. However, the great part of Irish history is, and in fairness, I think this applies to English history and American history, is that we've really been shaped by the various people that have lived here on this island, from those who built the ancient monuments to the Celts, to the Gaelic, to some would argue the Egyptian and Roman influence in our society. Obviously, English, Viking, Catholic, many different aspects throughout the ages have existed in our island, and all of them come together for that sort of collaborative culture which I've mentioned before. And the point being that the Christianity strengthened our culture. It didn't matter that it was foreign, it didn't matter that it was off of our shores, but it's that we didn't lose the good of what was before, and that we just kept building it, and that Christianity could coexist, and that we really allowed ourselves to thrive, and that we still can thrive. And the reason why I love this era is that we are willing to do all this when so much of Europe was backwards. We were this haven of so much, and I might be romanticizing this era a bit, but the reason I romanticize it is because I'd like to go back to that, in a sense, such unity and such egalitarianism, but still merit and still focus on things that are important culturally, I think. And I think that it fills me with such warmth for humanity to discover my own culture, similar to how I think religion has helped me to shape my worldview. And for 300 years there, we really had this going. We really had a second golden age. We had a revival of all things Irish, and it was not necessarily us projecting, it was us looking inward. And of course, all of this would end with the Viking invasions and then the Norman conquest of England, and it really would come to hit us so far, and we just fell so far as a people so quickly. And I think that a lot of this video has simply been me reminiscing on times that didn't exist, on an ethnic people that might be as distant from me as I am from Hong Kong. But I find that it's the unity through the cultural vision. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. I understand that this was more so my reminiscence rather than a strict historical breakdown, although I would like to think that some history was implanted here and that some of it came across well and came across well researched. In the future, I would like to do more constructive historical analyses of events. But for this video, all I really needed to do was, I think, bring you to that time. Thank you.